Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA on a balmy Wednesday afternoon. It's like 63 degrees outside Fahrenheit. I can't believe it. But I'm glad you're with us. The local time is 1:52 p.m. and we will begin our program called Eocene Session E, Cretaceous Fireworks, at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock local time. That's about 8 minutes from now. If you're watching this in replay, as always, you know you can scrub ahead. We can play a game right now. What do you notice that's different from past shows? I'll say hi to just a couple people, and then I got a couple things I need to do with my laptop here for a second. So are we doing okay? First of all, Lappy, and this ain't big smooth. That's a hint. Hello, Dale in Edmonton, Alberta. Oh, but I gotta slow this chat down now. Marion, Virginia. Brussels, Belgium. Bath, UK. Richmond, Kentucky. Santa Monica, California. Windham, Minnesota. Scrolling back. Tennessee. Menominee, Michigan. Southern Oregon, McKinley, Texas, Monetta, Virginia, USA, and so on and so forth. I'll do more hellos in just a bit, but I've got a little bit of business to take care of, so I would appreciate your patience, and I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag right now. Nat the Wonder Boy is here again, Mr. Computer Guy, and he's been going through boxes in his storeroom, and he found this computer, he found this camera, which apparently is from the Russian Empire, tracking my every move. So I can freeze it if we don't like it, but we're going to play with it. We're just playing with it. We're just playing with it. We're just playing with it today. Okay, concentrate, boy. Hang on now. Daddy's concentrating. Oh, God, I've got Creative Cloud sign in with Adobe. Give me a break. All right, talk amongst yourselves. Have you figured out why I email people after I start live streaming? Probably. Okay. Almost with you now. I mean, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. What is going on out there? In the words of Vince Lombardi, what the hell's going on out there? Copyright, trademark, NFL Films. Okay, who we got here? Yeah, who can I say hi to quickly? I'll slid on the chat again. Salem, Oregon. Hello. Nampa, Idaho. Island Girl. Camino Island. Las Vegas, Nevada. Hi, David. Cleveland, Ohio. Jennifer from Boise. Slow down now, boy. Daniel, Great Falls, Montana. Daryl from Arkansas City, Arkansas. Matthew from Douglas, Arizona. Garrett, the Dutch Night Owl from the Netherlands. Norley's back. You know where she's going? She's coming back to the Americas, baby. That was out today. Very excited. Manchester, UK. Hamlin, Germany. Hello, Sven. Friday Harbor, that's Dante. Kirk is in Sweden. Alf Magalund Larsen from Odense, Denmark. Hello. Push Button Edsel from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Russell's in Portland. Down to live now. Michael's in Republic, Washington, U.S. Puyallup. Dave's in Bremerton. Penn Island, Louisiana. Nine Falls in Washington. Hello, Brian. Rockland, California. Hawaii. Forget how to pronounce your name, sorry. The name of the town. Crown House in Austria. Zuzana in the Czech Republic. Trevor is in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Fair Witness, oh boy, is in Little Canada, Minnesota. We doing okay, Nat?
Oh yeah,
okay, good. Todd from, geologically speaking, Southern California, or words to that effect. Harlan, Iowa. Scottsville, Virginia. Liberty Lake, Washington. That's in the greater Spokane area. And so on and so forth. Polly, age 68 in Paddock Lake, Wisconsin. Well, I'm Nick, age 59 from Ellensburg, Washington, formerly Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. So hello, Polly. What did I say? I'm 59. Did I say 69? All right. So, yeah, we got a couple minutes. I'm super distracted. I'm super scattered. I'll tell you that right off the bat. I got papers everywhere, but I'm going to try not to use papers very much. You'll see what I mean in a second. I got crap on the iPad. Hopefully helpful. And then we got this camera that Nat just brought in. So I guess before we start, I will ask, we're just trying it out. So I got two questions about, this is not Big Smooth, in other words. Do you like the stream quality, those that are persnickety about cameras? Does this look smoother or about the same or worse than Big Smooth that we've had the last couple of shows? We don't think we can adjust anything with this camera as far as autofocus and auto white balance and everything else. It looks pretty good to us. You're still liking it, Nat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, he says. And then I do have the ability, I'll show you right now, if I put my hand up just like that, now it's frozen. And so it doesn't follow me. So at this point, it's just kind of a novelty where we can turn this thing on and off and follow me. I don't really, it's one of those things where it's kind of fun to see that it's a possibility, but I don't know how the hell I would use it today, for instance. So I think I just made an executive decision. I think I'm going to freeze this guy about right there. I think we're going to freeze it there for right now. And hang on just a sec. I got to send one more email. What a three-ring circus. I'm a slow typer among everything else. Okay, I got 1 minute. Would you give me 1 minute to get my head right? And I didn't have as much time to say hi to folks today, but maybe the payoff will be a couple of the tricks that I've got for you today. I guess we'll see. Thank you for joining us. I didn't even check. Are we 5 by 5? I'm sorry. Are we good with the Lappy and our frozen friend here? Frozen meaning I don't have it tracking right now. I'll wait for a few more. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Especially when I'm hot mic. Good. Okay. Thanks. Hot mic. Okay. Well, it is? That son of a bitch. It is. Hey, don't follow me. Don't follow me. All right, I'm late, boy. I'm late. A pleasant good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us. It's 2 o'clock or thereabouts. Maybe I'm a minute late, but who gives a... I'm glad that you're with us today. I have a plan, and it involves the Cretaceous and something called fireworks. So I'll tell you right up front. I'll remind you about this. I'm expecting you to watch these prior shows to make sense of what we're doing. I'm going to be referring to our last show a fair amount, Eocene D with Basil Tikoff and the Rangelia docking. So I hope that you know that's kind of part of your homework is to get up to speed. And I have noticed that people are watching the replays. Like there's usually about 1,000 that watch us live. That's been pretty steady. And then we're now, I think, of the 13,000, 14,000 that are watching each of the prior shows to make sure they're ready for the next one. So that's all wonderful. Thank you for your interest. And we'll just keep rolling. But that's just a word of warning that I'm going to be casually referring to stuff. And you're like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Basil? Who's that? That was the last show. So that's our pact or our agreement, I suppose. But you'll notice, even though this is the crazy Eocene A to Z, we are still not in the Eocene. We're getting close, I promise. And if you're getting impatient, at least we're going to the North Cascades today. That is happening. We are going to the North Cascades and looking semi-carefully at a paper written 25 years ago, a 1996 paper by two geologists, Paul Umhoefer and Bob Miller. And they've been publishing many, many papers over the past 30 years plus. But this is a paper that I think works well with what we were doing last time, focusing on thrust faults. So that's Act 3. Act 1 is kind of reminding ourselves of some of the cutesy little things that I had shared with us involving fireworks. So I need to define what I'm talking about, obviously. And then our guest last time, Basil Tikoff from the University of Wisconsin, has his own phrase that he's been using for 25 years called hit and run. So I need to explain that. And in between, I need to talk about Plutons, and I have some basic questions about Plutons here in the Pacific Northwest. Okay? So as I mentioned to the early arrivals, I'm a little bit scattered because I've got an iPad, let's call it Patty the iPad. And I'm going to go to Patty right now, I think. Let's do a hotkey, baby. Let's have Daddy talk to himself. So I just went to the iPad. So now, oh my God. Now we got to do the tracking thing, right? Look at how out of control that is. You don't need two marshmallows. You got a super mega marshmallow. Okay. So most importantly, this is my iPad screen now, and I've been practicing. Daddy's been practicing. And if I go to, let me go back. So I can now show you, I'm on the web now. I'm on the internet, the World Wide Web as it's known. You're here. Or you're here. Okay. And, you know, I can make things larger or smaller, and I've mentioned to you now that we can go to the upper right hand. Oh, wait. This is me. This is Sing Along with Mitch. All sorts of dated references. So if we click on Eocene, have you done this before yet? Are you wanting to see some of these science papers? So I've added 3 papers for us, kind of as a follow-up to last show and also looking ahead to next show. And here's Basil from 25 years ago, a paper called Hit and Run Collision for the Laramide orogeny. So I'll tell you right up front, our next show is going to be on the Rockies. I think it's just Saturday only, one show only. It's a morning show. It's a 9 a.m. show talking about the Laramide orogeny and the building of the Rockies. I'll explain more about that coming next time. But this is our paper that we are featuring today called the Mid-Cretaceous, again I'm going to enlarge for you, the Mid-Cretaceous thrusting in the southern coast belt, British Columbia and Washington, after strike-slip fault reconstruction. So the main thing, hotkey, the main thing that I'm going to try to do today is give you the background necessary to really get the power of this 25-year-old paper by Paul Umhoefer and Bob Miller. It's a good one, and I think I kind of overlooked it last year when I was doing the exotic series. I knew about it, but I don't think I sunk my teeth in very carefully. And I did a couple of days ago, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I was talking about in show D. And it continues our discussion. So back to the iPad, no big deal. Here's Paul's name and Bob's name. Bob teaches, they're both longtime teachers. And by now, most of you know what a scientific paper looks like. Now, this is 25 years ago. The figures that all of us were doing, you're here, these aren't sexy figures. Where's the color? Where's Chelsea and Mountain Press, whatever, But I like this. This makes me happy. This simple figure here. Forget about the fact that when they get into the nitty-gritty and they quote-unquote restore the North Cascades along strike-slip faults, I've got my work to do to help us understand the basics of what Paul and Bob are trying to do. Restoring young strike-slip faults to eventually then get back to the Cretaceous time. You're like, slow down, I'm getting dizzy. Okay, I will. That's going away. Done. Talks to himself. Oh shit, how do I get out of it? Okay, yeah. So, that is, well, that's tracky. I just decided. So, I'll be, back and forth between tracky, the main camera today, not Big Smooth, and the iPad, but that's our goal, is to not, hold up the papers to the camera anymore. I got the iPad to do that. I like reading emails, and you enjoyed, I know you did, you enjoyed Basil's appearance a week ago, our last show, the day before Thanksgiving. I enjoyed it too. He's very good. And Basil, a few days later, emailed me and a few other geologists. I'm just going to read it to you, part of it. Hi, Nick and others. This is Basil Tikoff, University of Wisconsin speaking. That's me. I think I should be clear that I am one of the very few people who tie the Rocky Mountain Formation to the Insular collision. The Insular is the superterrane that contains Rangelia. Most other people are so committed to flat slab subduction that they just can't get around the idea that it must happen. Certainly, it is the consensus of the geological community that flat slab subduction exists and caused the Rocky Mountains. So, Nick, if you think you might need to, so I think, Nick, you need to appreciate that you are out on the lunatic fringe if you suggest otherwise. And I'm reminded of an Edgar Allan Poe quote, I do not suffer insanity, I enjoy every minute of it. So, I'm setting the hook for Saturday. When we talk about the Rocky Mountains, we will be debating and talking about the two main camps, a majority opinion and a minority opinion, and the minority opinion involves Basil and Bob Hildebrand and a few others. And I'm doing my best to straddle things as usual, but I'm leaning heavily towards the Basil world, the lunatic fringe. Obviously, I got all this crazy stuff. I must be a lunatic. It makes sense. So that's coming on Saturday, but I think that's important to keep in the back of our mind because we are talking about a time. Do you know when the Cretaceous happened? Tracky, I'm over here. Geologic time stick. Paleozoic. Mesozoic. I am holding something up to the camera. Cretaceous, that's where we are today. We're older than the Eocene. I'm reminding you of this. But now we finally get into the details of what we were doing last time and what I want to try to do with you today. Okay, here we go. I had this idea that when we have a major terrain accrete or add to the edge of North America, That's a foomp. I'm changing the spelling. A foomp. Foomp. At a fireworks show. And then after a little bit of a delay, a lot of fireworks. The topic today is the fireworks that's happening after the main accretion of Wrangellia and Friends, otherwise known as the Insular Superterrane. And the form of these fireworks that happened in the Cretaceous 100 million years ago, and technically our fireworks are things we can look for in the North Cascades. That's the gimmick of the show. We're going to the North Cascades looking for plutons and thrust faults between 100 and 80 million years ago. That is our goal today. Do we really have plutons and thrust faults of this age window that may be a direct result of a foomp? A foomp. Now, the fireworks thing breaks down just a little bit. It doesn't work as nicely as I wanted it to for the Cretaceous. It's going to work much better when we have another foomp. 50 million years ago, that's the accretion of Silesia. And then the fireworks really are going to work for us in the Eocene, and I promise that's coming not that many sessions down the road. So keep this in mind, but realize that Basil Tikoff's hit and run, and you know that new paper that's in review right now, Basil was generous enough to send to me, even though it's not officially published yet. So I've got a sneak peek. He's still talking about the hit and run 25 years later. He's still talking about the hit and the run. So what is his hit and run? It's kind of similar to my fireworks thing. But his deal is that the Insular, Wrangellia and Friends, is going to hit the western margin of North America between 185 million years ago, producing plutons and thrust faults. And what's the run? What's the run between 85 and 55 million years ago? Baja, BC. So you remember Basil talking about a big Cretaceous hit in Idaho and further south. And then the thing that hit Idaho and places further south is no longer further south. That's the run. That's the Baja, BC thing. And you're like, whoa, what are you doing? First of all, you're not talking about the Eocene. I've already addressed that. We're heading there. Get off my back. But then why do you keep talking about Baja, BC if we're heading to the Rocky Mountains next week? If you listened carefully to Basil's talk, and that's what I learned from him last time, the Baja, BC thing and the Rocky Mountain thing kind of work together in a way, and I want to help you see that Saturday only. Okay, let's do something real. That was a real long-winded introduction. That was all introduction, I guess. Kind of setting the hook for not only today, but also Saturday. How are we doing, Matt? Good. Looking okay?
You're frozen. You want it to be?
If I'm frozen, I think that's good. I think that's good. Wait. Am I? No, I don't want to be. All right. So let's talk about some basics for the beginners. Many of us are beginners, of course. If you're on a map and you're trying to plot something called a thrust fault, you have a very fat line along the trend of the fault, and then you have these little black triangles. That's a telltale sign for a thrust fault. And you're like, well, I don't know what a thrust fault is. A thrust fault is from squeezing the crust, like when insular superterrane collided with western North America, for instance. And you squeeze the crust enough where you break the crust, you brittly deform the upper part of the crust, you make a fault, but then you keep squeezing even though that crack got formed. And I'm showing you a crack that has a relatively low angle. It's close to a flat angle instead of a very steep reverse fault. A thrust fault is a low angle squeezing fault. So I didn't bring the pizza boxes in. but I brought books like this. Here's 2 roadside geology books, no big deal. And let's do some squeezing of these 2 guys. And if I continue to squeeze with my hands, I'm going to shove the Washington book up a thrust fault, and the hanging wall is being thrust over the foot wall. So in other words, to get this to happen, I need to shove a book up and over another one. And the slippage boundary between these 2 books is called a thrust fault. Okay? Now, if we have a bunch of these structural naps or these thrust faults, now I got 5 books, do the same thing. I can still squeeze things and have these faults. I have 4 faults between 5 books. And I have slippage along those thrust faults, low angle, right? So that is a concept we talked about last winter, especially in the San Juan Islands. So if I find the thing I was using last fall from the San Juan Islands, and I found it, can we look for thrust faults on that map of the San Juan Islands, courtesy of Darrell Cowan and his many students in the San Juan Islands? And can we decide that they are in our magic window for time? In other words, are they Cretaceous? Are they mid-Cretaceous thrust faults that are potentially from the collision of insular superterrane with the rest of North America? Nat's going to have a stroke now because I'm still holding stuff up to the camera. But here, I'll slow down for you for just a second. Is our big map of the San Juan Islands, a geologic map. Each color is a different pizza box or a different roadside geology book, as I was just showing you. And maybe, just maybe, this new camera has enough focus to show, by God, there are those thrust fault symbols that we can see, those little black triangles on each of the thrust faults. And yes, these thrust faults in the San Juan Islands are in this magic time window. Okay, so let's pause for just a second. What are we doing today? We're talking about fireworks from the Cretaceous. What's the context? The fireworks are forming inland of when we collide Wrangellia. Hey, I'm over here. It might be official. I don't think I like this. Thing shuts off by itself, Nat.
Detecting your hand movements, all that.
Oh, it keeps shutting off because I'm using my hands too much. Well, that's a problem. So instead of Wrangellia being a little equant or equant shaped pound cake out in the water like I was stressing before, again because of Basil's talk, I think I want to go bigger. I mean, Wrangellia is part of the insular superterrane story, but Wrangellia itself, as you learned last show with me, and even Jerome, the show before, there's an early volcanic arc history to Wrangellia. Then there's the flood basalt chapter. Then there's more of a volcanic arc with subduction later in the Wrangellia story. Plus, throw in Alexander that came from Scotland and Finland and everything else, and a couple other scraps as well. So I think I'm kind of abandoning our very simple little pound cake that's circular out in the water. I thought that was going to help us, but you know what we're doing, I think, right? We're learning together. And I hope it doesn't bother you when I just kind of abruptly abandon something and move on to something else. I hope it doesn't bother you. I hope you can see the positive part of it, where I'm learning just as much as you, maybe more. And I'm continuing to work on threading these concepts together as we march forward. And if I'm really interested, I just make a whole new show next time about a certain collection of thoughts. So you remember, we've already kind of scrapped the Cache Creek flood basalt story because Mitch Mahalanek said there wasn't much of a story there, so I just kind of left that alone. Now I'm leaving a simple circular Wrangellia and realizing, because there's so much thrust faulting, when we finally dock Insular when? 100 million years ago. When we finally dock Insular, when we hit, oh, it's gone. They hit 100 million years ago, according to Basil, the according to me, inboard, we're going to have all of these thrust faults that are not just in Washington. Or in other words, the size and the scale of how many thrust faults we're talking about that are this age tell us there was a much larger thing than a simple pound cake out in the water. That's the fireworks. But it's not just thrust faults. Also in the same time window between 100 and 80, also the Cretaceous. Do you remember this from last time? In this land of thrust faults from the mid-Cretaceous, again, not just a couple of counties worth, but all through the western North American continent, there are these Plutons that look like this on maps. You know, they're kind of blobby shapes looking down from heaven. Granitic type stuff. Might be a granite, might be a tonalite, might be a diorite, might be a granodiorite. These are all chemical differences, but we can just say granite, quote unquote, or granitic. They're also showing up during the fireworks time, which is immediately after our big hit. You've got it now, I think. So I don't like this as much. I like this, courtesy of Basil's emphasis that we had before. Now, I include this on this little primer board because these are also faults in the North Cascades. We're going momentarily. But these faults are not from squeezing the crust together, so they don't have the little black triangles on the end. Most of you know this. These are strike-slip faults, like the San Andreas fault. You need a couple demos? Here's the state of California today. We know the San Andreas fault is a very well-known strike-slip fault. In fact, it's a transform plate boundary. But if we take this strike-slip fault and restore it and get it back to the way that it was before the San Andreas fault began to form, we can take this quote-unquote granite of the Sierra Nevada mountains and restore it to its original position. And then if we start doing earthquakes, 20 feet every time we have an earthquake, 20 feet, another earthquake, 20 feet, another earthquake, another, you get it. For 20 million years worth, we can have a cumulative displacement, a total offset on this strike-slip fault. But the idea for today's lecture, even though we're not in California today, the idea for today's lecture, and this is what Paul and Bob did so beautifully 25 years ago in the North Cascades, is if we want to see what this looked like, what this fireworks looked like inboard of where Rangelia hit or the Insular Superterrane hit, we got to take all these young strike-slip faults and get them out of there. We got to restore the Pacific Northwest to what it looked like in the Cretaceous. Hope you're following me. So to do that, you use piercing points. You take two piercing blue eyes, and if the piercing blue eyes are offset today by a strike-slip fault, then you've got to restore that granite back to the way that it used to be. Or if you want to go to the Eocene fault. So now we're talking about, come on, Tracky. Whoa. Settle down, boy. Settle down, boy. What the fuck? So in Wenatchee, let's restore the Eocene strike-slip fault. We need piercing points. Oh yeah, we got this Joaquin biotite gneiss that we can restore. Can you do it backwards? Kinda. I'll do one more. The Straight Creek fault. There's the Straight Creek Fault, which is younger than the Cretaceous. Starting to get pissed off. Are you frozen? Are you frozen? Restore the fruitcake. You got it now. So that's where we're going in Act 3 with Bob Miller and Paul Umhoefer in the North Cascades. How are we doing? Oh, Daryl's in the chat? Nice. Okay. Let's take a little break. Let's switch over to the iPad. Let's, so a little programming note for you. We are in the last week of the term here. Have you been at a university before? It's not a particularly pretty place, the last week of an academic quarter. Students are fried, they're sleep deprived, they're stressed out. Professors, pretty much same thing, I guess. But final exam week is next week. And once we get to December 11th, you see what I want to do? I want to double up. I want to add some sessions because Liz is going to be out of town, dark as hell. I suppose it'll be back to winter conditions. So I want to do Saturdays and Sundays for these 2 weekends only. And then we'll take a good 2-week break from each other over the holidays. That's the plan. Okay? So here we are today, of course. I'll see you next with the Rocky Mountains on Saturday, 9 a.m. And then once we get to middle of next week, this will be a ghost town, and people can drop in and visit afterwards and all that. Okay, good. Why else did I want to come here? I want to keep us big here for just a second. So here is a look at, I can play this. Here's from Ron Blakeney, University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. And these are known continental positions that we have through time. So this is similar to Christopher Scotise's YouTube channel, but this is Ron Blakeney putting these maps together. And notice the time now. We're way, 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 way too old, even for the Cretaceous, for goodness sake. And North America is in the southern hemisphere, and you're like, which one? I don't even know which one it is. Well, I struggle myself. But North America, I'll just play this. I'm advancing with my little index finger here. I'm like, what? What are we doing? Why are we looking at this? You'll see in a second. Now, North America's front and center. We just crossed the equator. And now we're in Pangea time, right? The supercontinent. And now Pangea is about to break apart. And what do we have here? Okay, now I do want to use my pointer. Now, we got some stuff out here in the water, and this is Ron Blakeney, and I don't know if he's much of a Baja, BC guy. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's not. But he's got some stuff out here that we're going to add. Is that Rangelia? And if it is, why has he got it as a green bean as opposed to a pound cake, sponge cake? I'm distracted by all the technology today. All right, keep going, boy. I got to play it again to go? I guess so. 150 million years ago, now we're approaching our time window of today. North America is starting to look more and more comfortable, familiar. Now, I'm going to come back out. Now we got some kind of underwater spreading ridge and some sort of underwater spreading ridge at 66, the age of the dinosaur catastrophe. And then weird times here that I just happened to grab. 57 million years ago, and then 23 million years ago. At least we're looking somewhat comfortable now, or comfortable is the wrong word. A little bit more familiar now. Okay, so my point is that's kind of cool, kind of helpful, and we were trying to place Wrangeli on top of the Galapagos hotspot last time, you recall. But I'm going to play this a couple times. This is from the Karin Siglock group and one of her graduate students that published this last year. Henderson, I think, is the name. Is that right? Oh, no, Edward Clinette. Excuse me, Edward Clinette. Play it. I'm not going to say anything. I'll let it play once. 100 million years ago, right there. Okay. We'll look at it again, but what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to keep changing scales on you on purpose. I'm trying to go down to the North Cascades, then I'm trying to go to the Pacific Northwest, then I'm going to try to go to the western margin of North America. Now we're in the frickin' entire globe. Now we're coming back to western North America. I don't think it's going to work for everybody, but those of you who are on top of your game, I think, can kind of see how this works together. And I'm playing with this strategy to try to keep coming up with certain themes, but keep visiting at different levels. Huge, big picture down to tiny stuff and seeing how they might work together possibly. Okay, I'm going to shrink this and try to control it now. Can I? Or at least I can pause it. So look at the colors here. All I want you to notice now is Insular is orange, and Insular Superterrane is here. You're not on the iPad, got it. So orange is Insular, including Wrangellia. Wrangellia and Fringe is the orange thing. And the other thing I want you to notice is the Intermontane, which Basil was referring to a number of times last show. So those are the two big superterranes. The purple accreted 170 million years ago, remember? And the orange is the Insular, including Wrangellia, that accreted 100 million years ago. Why am I showing you this? It's going back to Basil's discussion of the hit and run. Basil's saying we have a massive Cretaceous hit 100 million years ago, and then we run the frickin' thing north up the coast, otherwise known as Baja, BC. Okay? Let's do it. Can I zoom? Oh, frick yeah, I can zoom. Oh, you can't see the color, you can't see the times, but who cares? I'll narrate. So there we go with a massive collision between orange and purple. It's being rowed along the front of North America. There we go. There we go. Let's go back. That's good. That's good. I'll give you the times this time. I told you I was going to be scattered today. Partly because I don't really know how to control this very well. So this thing starts, this animation starts. And by the way, what's the data for this animation? These are ocean plates that have sunk down into the lower mantle that Karin Siglock and others have been finding and then restoring back to the surface. Talk about restoring. And we just missed our big, I'm so busy talking, I got to go back again. I'm going to concentrate this time, boy. Setting up for our massive 100 million year old collision. Orange is coming in. They got a little bit early, don't they? They've got Insular hitting too early for our taste. And they're supposed to start the run at 85 million years ago. They're not starting the Baja BC till like 65. So the timing's off, but otherwise, I'm hoping you can see the power in that. Okay. Plutons. The Plutons are our other part of the Cretaceous fireworks. And I'm slowing down because I want to know how I want to do this in just a short amount of time. I'm running a little bit late, as you can probably tell. Here's a tiny little picture of a Pluton. It's a blob of solidified magma in the crust. And I have a question mark here. And the question mark is, why is all that magma there? Why is there so much plutonic material showing up inboard of the Insular Superterrane docking between 100 and 80 million years ago? There's a majority opinion and there's a minority opinion. Oh boy. What have you been taught? Why do you have large volumes of magmatic material in a continental crust setting? What's the obvious answer? This is what's known as a volcanic arc. You have a line of volcanoes, like the Cascades, like the Andes today. You have a subducting plate. This is subduction of an oceanic plate. You're generating huge volumes of magmatic material. Magmas from a volcanic arc. And then you solidify the stuff. Is that the explanation for what I just erased? Most say yes. But I guess I have a significant question, and I'm not alone. Like, why are you getting all this fireworks, all this plutonic fireworks, after you dock Insular? Like, isn't the subduction now much further offshore? Or aren't we jumping the position of the trench and therefore jumping the position of where the subduction is beginning? And wouldn't we have kind of a shifting westward of a bunch of plutonic material? Is there another model that could explain all of this magma showing up inboard of a major docking of a huge superterrane known as Insular Superterrane? Yes, there is a model. No, not many people believe it exists as a viable model. I'm kind of fond of it personally, but what do I know? So how are you supposed to make a bunch of magma if you don't have subduction? And the answer is sure, if you have a major green bean, string bean, pound cake, sponge cake out in the water, insular, and you slowly bring this thing in, sure, you're probably going to have some volcanic arc material as you bring this in, as you hit the animation button and this thing comes in and this subduction happens and everything else. But some of you longtime fans know that there is something called slab failure, where when you finally dock the Insular Superterrane and you remove the rest of this ocean floor crust that's between these two big boys, then you probably, goes the thought, break off the remaining subducting slab that has now disappeared into the earth. You break off a bunch of that and you have a failure of that slab. And is it possible, therefore, to have all of these Plutons in our Cretaceous fireworks from breaking the plate off in the subsurface and then having a surge of hot mantle coming into the crustal levels and creating crust that way? Volcanic arc with subduction, magma bodies galore, but not from subduction. Majority opinion, majority, minority opinion. I guess I'm a minority. So I emailed a couple guys that I know have spent a lot of time studying Plutons in Washington. One is Mike Eddy. Mike Eddy, part of the North Cascades team, part of the dream team, Mike Eddy. Mike, what do you think? These Cretaceous Plutons in the North Cascades, are they really volcanic arc from a subduction zone or not? Is this slab failure thing a possibility? Mike, I think that the general consensus, Nick, is that they are subduction related. Bob Hildebrand has pushed back on this assumption, but he's in the minority. He suggested that all of the classic arc Plutons of the West are slab failure in origin. I'm skeptical of going that far. This is Mike Eddy talking now. To me, slab failure magmatism should occupy a pretty narrow range of ages in a given area, and the Cordilleran magmatic belts were generally active for far more than 10 million years in duration. Okay, so that's Mike Eddy, the guy that I'm associated with in the North Cascades, being firmly in favor, at least now, with a volcanic arc and not thinking that he has data for this. Now, Jeff Tepper, I think both these guys will be guests at some point this winter. Jeff Tepper, who spent a lot of time studying this, okay, let's go to that. God, it's almost 2:45. How's that possible? This is so much fun, though. So Jeff made this map specially for us. The title of this map is For Zentner's Class. He sent it at midnight last night. So thanks very much for that, Jeff. So Jeff has in blue here, do you know where you are? Probably not. This is northeastern Washington. So the brown are the flood basalts, that's the German chocolate cake. And then all this blue is a lot of Pluton material. And these numbers are in millions of years ago. So you'll notice that some are Eocene age, and so we'll be coming back to some of that later this winter. But some of these magmatic systems, or these plutonic rocks, like think granites or diorites or tonalites, Jeff has studied carefully, and he's gotten detailed ages. Next one. I said, is it okay, Jeff, if I share this little Excel spreadsheet with everybody? He's like, yeah, that's fine. So notice he's got granites in eastern Washington, northeastern Washington, and some of the North Cascade. There's the latitude and longitude if you're real curious. Starting 113 million years ago and going all the way up to Eocene time. So this is a work in progress. He doesn't have everything nailed down. But the main point I want to share with you and show you a plot that I don't understand at all. I don't know if many really do. But let me read Jeff's paragraph email sent last night to all of us, and then we'll move on. Hi, Nick. I agree that the Cretaceous Plutons, in other words, I shared Mike Eddy's reply to me to Jeff. Jeff says, I agree with Eddy that the Cretaceous Plutons in the North Cascades and in northeastern Washington are quote-unquote normal subduction-related bodies. There has been no boron-beryllium work, but the slab break-off signature of Hildebrand is not nearly as pronounced in those rocks as in the Eocene ones. See the plot below. Do you understand the plot? I don't. Personally, I don't think this parameter is reliably diagnostic of break-off, but has been used for that purpose. In addition, the Cretaceous rocks don't define as broad a path as the Eocene ones in Montana, as far as I know. And they are not associated with extensional structures, another contrast with the Eocene. Zircon saturation temperatures, which is the way I calculated magma temperatures, are lower in Cretaceous versus Eocene Plutons, which is consistent with their being wetter and thus more arc-like. but not proof of that. I'm attaching my Excel file. So this is kind of a to be continued, but we are really talking about these plutons showing up. The plutons are showing up everywhere, inboard of this docking. And especially when we look at plutons like we are about right now in the North Cascades, that's going to be in the back of my mind for a while, even though my two trusted sources are saying slab failure is not, they don't see the data for that at this point. Okay, we're finally going to the North Cascades. And I'm going back to the iPad here. You can see how tricked out I am now. Nat's even taken off. He knows how much I'm rolling at this point. So here's where I am right now in Discovery Hall and Planetarium on the campus of Central Washington University. Now, what if I want to fly up to Mount Stuart, which is really the beginning of the North Cascades for us here in Central Washington? Can he type? I don't want to go to Mount Stuart School. I want to go to Mount Stuart itself. Oh, for Christ's sake. All right. Let's just fly. Let's just fly, baby. All right. I'm going 3D. Let's go. You ready? We're going to the North Cascades. I'm using my fingers. There's Ellensburg Airport. Leavenworth. Okay. So that didn't take us long, did it? This mountain, as you've heard me say many times before, is very close to Ellensburg. And the hikes in the low country around Mount Stuart is very important and very accessible to us. Now, while you're watching that, I'm flipping this chalkboard around and asking ourselves, do we have any Cretaceous fireworks in the neighborhood? In the North Cascades? Well, yes, that's the gimmick of today's show, but like within an hour's drive of Ellensburg, and the answer is yes. This is the relationship we talked about last winter. The granite of Mount Stuart that you were just looking at. You want to look at it again? There it is. The granite that's in that mountain is between 96 and 91 million years ago. That's plutonic rock in our time window between 180, correct? What else do we have in the Mount Stuart area? We have a thrust fault, the windy past thrust. And the windy past thrust fault has taken Ingalls terrain and shoved it up and over Chewaucam schist, exotic terrain. So I'm saying to you with a straight face, within an hour's drive of this classroom, we can get to a Cretaceous thrust fault and a Cretaceous Pluton, and the fact that the Pluton is invading or cutting across the thrust fault tells us this all happened pretty quickly. In other words, this thrust fault has to be younger than 100 million years ago, but older than 96 million years ago, because it's cut across, because this granite is cutting across the thrust fault. So everything's happening pretty quickly after the insular superterrane collides. And to Saturday, we're going to realize that a lot of stuff, according to Basil and others, a lot of stuff is happening between 100 and 80, but in the case of the North Cascades, plenty is happening just in those first few million years after the insular superterrane collides. There's a lot to chew on here. Here's the last thing I'm doing in the chalkboard, and then yes, we have a special guest here today. We do. But I want to do one more thing before we bring him on. This is, sorry. Oh, did I just do that stuff on the chalkboard and you couldn't see it? I'm getting mixed up. Where am I here? Where am I? Oh, no. Yeah, I'm on this floaty thing. Well, let me stand in front of this so you can actually see the frickin' thing. Hey, I'm over here. I don't think I like this camera. Maybe you do. When you go to the Umhoefer paper, that first figure that makes me happy is nice and simple. And here's the Canadian-US boundary. So this is the 49th parallel north of the equator. And here are these major zones crossing over from British Columbia into northern Washington. And we can't follow them further south because we run into the German chocolate cake, the Columbia River basalt lavas. But here's Jerome Lessman's house on the Insular Superterrane. And here's something called the Coast Belt, which is the focal point of the Umhoefer-Miller paper. And they were taking this coast belt in British Columbia, which is full of thrust faults between 180 million years ago, and is full of plutons in this coast belt between 180, you get it now? Like we're inboard of the Insular, and here's all this trauma, here's all this fireworks happening inboard of the docking of the Insular Superterrane 100 million years ago. That includes the North Cascades. And specifically, that includes what we just looked at. The Stuart Pluton invading the windy pass thrust, both are right there. So this and this are just two little examples of this broad zone. So if this thing docked 100 million years ago, and it did, I'm over here, are you with me? This is stuff that's between 180 inboard, the trauma from the impact. Further back in time, our number was 170 for the accretion. In other words, earlier than that, 170 million years ago, we accreted the Intermontane Superterrane with Cache Creek and its buddies, Quinellia and Stachynia, and the Omanika Belt in British Columbia that continues down now into Washington and even, I suppose, Panhandle of Idaho. Same idea. We're not talking about these fireworks, but there is a nice symmetry and a nice simplicity to this diagram. And even when we look at this map here, we can see those guys coming into Washington. We can't follow them because of the CRBs. They continue beneath the German chocolate cake, but we have no idea what they look like down below. So I love this simplistic view, and it's only possible by restoring all of those younger strike slip faults and other younger structures to get us to this simpler time. And that's the role of the Paul Umhoefer and Bob Miller paper. So, I think I want to show you one more quick diagram, and then we go to our special guest today. iPad. So, this is not from the Paul Umhoefer and Bob Miller paper. This is from Mike McGroder, another Darrell Cowan student. Darrell Cowan's like the godfather of everybody. If Darrell's in the chat, that means Darrell's taking another trip down memory lane, because all these workers were former students of Darrell. But McGroder, back in 1991, was trying to take our thrust faults in the San Juan Islands and noticing how they change appearance in the crystalline core of the North Cascades, and then we have something looking a little bit more reasonable back on the other side. So he basically tried to restore that cross-section and try to visualize what the crystalline core looked like before the geologic elevator went up. I know this is advanced thinking now, but if I've lost some of you, don't give up on us. Our guest is coming in just a second. In fact, I know another way to get some of you back. Did you notice the title of this presentation? I promised we were going to the North Cascades, didn't I? These are some of the best photos from Gary Paul, Backcountry Gary, who has taken these beautiful backcountry photos in the North Cascades. I've selected some of these because look at the ages of these things. We're in our time window. Here's a beautiful Pluton called the Black Peak Batholith. That's 90 million years. Volcanic arc or slab failure? I guess volcanic arc. But Gary has added a lot to us in the past year's series, and I always felt bad in the cozy fort holding up my dopey little laptop screen with a bunch of reflections, and I look at that. I couldn't show you the beauty of Gary's photos, so maybe I can now. That's a Cretaceous batholith on the left. That's an Eocene batholith on the right. So let's not forget, we're talking about a beautiful place more than anything else. And our special guest knows almost all of these places. He has spent almost 50 consecutive summers. I repeat, our guest today has spent almost 50 consecutive summers mapping, making geologic maps and geologic studies in this very challenging country. And I've selected these photos of Gary Paul because each of them has either a Cretaceous Pluton or a Cretaceous thrust fault in it, or a younger strike-slip fault that needs to be undone or restored. So thanks again to Gary Paul. Okay, have you guessed who our guest is? Oh, that's cute. Have you guessed who our guest is? He is a longtime geology professor at San Jose State University. Bob Miller, co-author of the Paul Umhoefer and Bob Miller paper. So Bob, I'm coming at you right now. Let's bring you on.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Bob.
Hello there.
I cannot hear you at the moment, and let's see if anybody else can. It's great to have you with us.
How about now?
I'm still not hearing you, so, oh, I don't have my headphones on. Is that part of it? Okay, Bob, give it another try.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Now I can hear you. There's a little bit of a delay, it looks like, but I think we're going to be okay. And they can all hear you fine, so that's wonderful. Are you in your office today at San Jose State?
Yes, I am.
How long have you been teaching there?
I guess 37 years.
And was
But
that
not.
right?
But
Go ahead.
I was. Daryl was on my thesis committee, so he's been around longer than me.
Oh, Daryl is the godfather for sure. So, what was the year of your first field season in the North Cascades?
1974 in the Ingalls complex.
Wow. And was that your PhD dissertation?
That was my master's.
Okay. Was that also at the University of Washington?
Yes, I continued in the Ingalls, but I mostly worked out of Cleellum, not very far from Ellensburg,
Oh,
the
that's
first
right.
summer.
That's right.
Then did a lot of stuff out of Leavenworth also.
Well, so you were watching what happened here in the whatever it was, almost an hour, I guess. It must have seemed like forever till we got to you. What part of what I was just doing needs expansion? I'm sure most of it, but as far as those plutons and those thrust faults, what what jumps out at you as something that you want to expand upon a little bit?
Well, I think you summarized it well. I guess I'm in the majority camp for the mid-Cretaceous, the 96 million years being related to an arc, and the younger ones, slab break-off, slab failure, like Jeff Tepper thinks, the 50 million year, or 45. In fact, you had one nice picture with the golden horned batholith, which is a break-off Pluton in our model, and then the Black Peak. I think the other thing that's interesting in the that ties some of the thrusting and the Plutonism together is that when the Plutons came in, some of the 96 to 90 or even 89 million, Andalusite was formed. And without going into a bunch of details, Andalusite's a relatively low pressure metamorphic mineral formed by the heating. But then there is a substantial pressure increase after that. So the mineral kyanite, which is higher pressure, often replaces the Andalusite. I guess the point being that there's evidence the crust was thickening as Plutons came in, and it's even nicely documented for the Black Peak, where you showed that funky laser or ytterbium diagram that Jeff had, or Hildebrand. But there's actually a suggestion that at the early part of the Black Peak intruded, and then the crust was loaded on top of it based on the geochemistry of the younger part of the Pluton. So there's abundant evidence then that the crust was really thickening as these magmas came in, which of course thrust faulting can cause thickening. So that was very nice. Nicely ties together.
It does nicely. Thank you. Yes, and that really sets the stage for the Eocene, right? The project that you and Mike Eddy and Stacia Gordon are conducting is not just looking at the Eocene, but you're kind of starting to look at some of the rocks in the neighborhood of these ages today.
Yes. So the whole range, and this has been part of a project with Jeff Tepper as well, and Jeff. You already quoted Jeff, and he has a lot of good data as well.
So why is the crustal thickening part of the story important? That seems to keep coming up, but like to talk about extension in the Eocene, you really need to understand the thickening process beforehand?
Yeah, one of the things that we've argued for 20 years, I guess, is that the North Cascades, the crustal thickness of the arc, the 90 million year arc, let's say, was perhaps on the order of 65 kilometers thick, which a normal arc is 30 to 35 kilometers. And so we think it was an extremely thick continental magmatic arc, say like the Central Andes, which is the thickest arc crust on the planet today. So it's kind of an interesting just to thinking about the North Cascades that way, but it also ties in with your relationship of thrust faulting to Plutons, the idea that there really is this evidence, a bunch of evidence that the crust is thickening by thrust faulting at the same time, and folding at the same time these magmas are coming into the crust.
That's very interesting. Now, that of course makes me think about the role of Insular and the coast belt. Where in your mind do you have Insular in the North Cascades, if at all? It's kind of a gray zone for me, like how much of the North Cascades is Intermontane, how much is Insular? Is that clear in your mind?
I think if we except that some of the rocks, the deepest rocks, right near the Canadian border in east of Bellingham, that is tied together with Wrangellea. I think we have it that far east. Now, remember, if you restore, like you did with your paper,
Yeah.
the Straight Creek Fault back, that puts the area around Bellingham, or east of Bellingham, puts it right next to kind of the Mount Stuart area.
Yeah.
So I would put the boundary somewhere more or less there. In the North Cascades, it's easier to tie the rocks to the Intermontane terrain, at least in terms of some things looking like what's called the Bridge River Complex Cache Creek. Daryl might have some thoughts on that. He certainly worked on the Northwest Cascade system in the near the border in the San Juans, but that seems to me to be the better tie to put these small terrains at least related to some of the rocks that are in the Intermontane.
Well, I mean, we got Daryl in the live chat. Now, I don't know if I can get him on here or not. Oh, I see. Daryl's in the live chat today. Let's take the different approach. I love what you're doing here, Bob. This is super interesting. I don't know how much things have changed over your 45 years, like Insular and Intermontane and the bigger picture views. I mean, you're starting looking at the North Cascades kind of in the era of Peter Mish and everything else. So can you comment just on how these larger scale concepts have evolved over your career?
Sure. I think when we were first starting out, or I was first starting out, plate tectonics was still pretty new. And
so crazy.
North Cascades was not being thought about it that much, or was just starting to be. And some of the first things that happened were the identification of fossils, which had these Tethyan fauna that looked like things in Indonesia. So there were fossils in the San Juan Islands in British Columbia. Cache Creek was where Jim Monger of the Canadian Geological Survey and others recognized. So that really got people thinking, well, stuff's come from far away. And those papers were in the early 70s. And I think we were just starting to think about things like which terrains had actually had those fossils versus other ones that had fossils that looked like the ones in West Texas. And so that really got people thinking more about Insular and Intermontane. And then you talked about, I think last time with Basil, you showed the Davy Jones paper.
Yeah.
And so that was all happening while I was a grad student. So there's a lot of things I think we've, seemed like we've changed some of we have changed. There's certainly a lot.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The basic idea of this insular intermontane, and then you mentioned the coast belt. And so the coast belt is important, this idea that there are these small fragments of terrains caught between the main coherent, semi-coherent insular and intermontane terrain.
Well, I'm curious about that. Let's talk about that paper a little bit with Paul, and then we can turn it over to some live chat if you're willing to answer a few questions here live
Sure.
with the folks that are with us.
Sure.
So you're kind of 20 years into your career at this point, and how did that paper with Paul Umhoefer come about? And were you working with British Columbia geologists to try to make those correlations between matching the BC faults with the Washington faults?
Yeah, well, Paul was a friend, and he was working or had worked up in British Columbia, of course, with the Baja BC. He'd done his PhD thesis, sort of supervised by Daryl and Jody Bourgeois at Washington. And so we chat, and then, there's still, it was a problem, there still is, people on each side of the border. If you look at a lot of the maps, They just stop at the border. So we got talking about what might correlate or whatever, and he came to San Jose for a week or 10 days, and we just sat around cutting up maps. No fancy computer stuff. We blew up some maps in the department office, and then just walked and started chopping them up different ways. So we came up with those 2 reconstructions, in between doing some wine tasting and sort of things like that. But yeah, so that's how that came about. We really tried to tie together, and it might seem like it would be a simple thing, but even with the San Andreas Fault, it took a long time. And one of the issues that we have across the Straight Creek Fault, which would be Washington's version of the San Andreas, I guess, is that there's been different amounts of uplift. So the rocks on the east side tend to be a little deeper than the rocks on the west side. And so when you try and match things up, it's not as simple as like with the San Andreas, where there's a volcano that's chopped in half, and you see it in one place and you see it in another, and they're at the same level. The uplift isn't significantly different across the fault. So anyway, that's how that evolved, and then we got thinking, let's think about what it means in terms of the width of the thrust belt and that sort of thing. And I guess the other issue, at that point, we really didn't have, that was before detrital zircons,
yes,
which has made such a big, which you've talked about. And so we know that some of the correlations say that Mike McGroder made maybe don't work, because now we have data, and some that we made probably don't work as well, just because we didn't really know the ages of the rocks very well.
Well, sure. I mean, we all know there's advances that sometimes take a paper and move it forward, but the revelation to me from that paper 25 years ago, I think this is 2 years ago, and I was just so obsessed with the Stuart Range and the Chewacam Schist and a couple other things locally, and I didn't have anything bigger to plug it into. And suddenly you guys are showing this coast belt crossing the border, and that the North Cascades are part of this BC coast belt. That was just huge for me, and I'm guessing nobody was doing that before that paper was published.
No, not too much. I think, well, even the way the Straight Creek Fault, the idea that it was a big strike slip fault, it had been mapped, but the way I understand it from Peter Misch is he had one student working on the Chewacam Schist out of Leavenworth, a guy named Plummer, and another student up in British Columbia, and the two, he looked at their thin sections and said, gee, these rocks look a lot alike. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of how that came about. The initial correlation, even though his estimate was higher than ours.
I got gnat in my ear here, and we're bumping up my mic just in case. So that I love the backstory on that, and especially with our discussion today. I mean, I know that you and Mike and Stacia will continue in the next few years at least, and remind us what you are bringing to the current team. Are you still focusing on, let's say, the Ross Lake Fault Zone and a few others? I'm hoping to have you back on this, by the way.
Oh, I've been, I can't get away from the Ross Lake Fault Zone. It'd be nice if we'd figure it out. Yeah. A lot of our work, and I have a grad student who was an undergrad at Western Washington, who's working in the Skagit Gneiss, and that's where we're still spending a good bit of time in the Skagit Gneiss. In fact, Stacia Gordon and I were out for a couple weeks, or more than 2 weeks, in the Skagit last summer. So keeping interest in that.
Nice. Okay, well, Bob, if you got 5 more minutes, how about I try to grab a few of these questions, and we'll just have these guys ask you. Thank you for, as always, for your time. My mic is maxed out now, so hopefully you can hear me, everybody. And go ahead and ask a few questions in uppercase. And Bob, if you're able to see this, you can grab something too. But I'll just get the ball rolling here. Questions for Bob, or just in general about the North Cascades. Bob knows pretty much everything about that area. Jeff's brain is hurting. Okay, yeah, there you go. There's a delay in the comments here. Frank says, "Hi, Bob. I still owe you dinner. See you soon." That's Frank Raviola. And here's Backcountry Gary, the guy that took all the beautiful photos. Bob, is the yellow aster gneiss related to the Alexander terrain? Is that a little bit out of your area of expertise?
Well, that's what that's a fairly common interpretation now.
Yeah.
That yes, it is. So yeah.
Good. Oh, here's Daryl S. Cowan. And I was going to have Daryl on today, but I think we got a problem with his camera. Let me double check one more time. We do. So Daryl, we'll test out that camera next time. We'll bring you on next time. Daryl asks, Bob, why aren't there any Plutons in the Northwest Cascades and San Juan Islands?
That's a tough problem, because I think it might have to do with the trend of the belt of Pluton. So when you do that reconstruction, we don't have, and when you pull the North Cascades back up, it may just be the way the Plutons project to the northwest, that they're going northwest of there. But it's a little more complicated than that, and I don't want to get into all the details. But one of the things that we've been playing around with, actually, just at GSA, looking at maps, is that there's now a fair amount of geochronology from British Columbia coast mountains, or there's new geochronology. And so we tried to match up some faults to see, like, if we can get a belt Pluton, say, like 80 to 60 million year Plutons.
Okay.
It's hard to match those up with anything in British Columbia until at least the south, near the international border, which is kind of where Daryl's talking about. So that's the best I can do, Daryl.
Well, plus there's other terrains that are just weirdly not shot full of Plutons, right? Like the Swakane doesn't have any Plutons coming through it. The Ingalls doesn't have any Plutons coming through it. Shouldn't there be Plutons coming through everything through the North Cascades, or not? Well,
Plutons do occur in, there's a width to typical arcs. So, you don't go, the Cascades, you don't have volcanoes in Olympia and in Spokane, right? You've got them, even now, it's fairly, St. Helens is pretty far west, and Adams is pretty far east. But if you look at, just say, quaternary volcanism in the Cascades, it's not occurring over that huge region. And I think one of the questions that really keeps coming up is, okay, in Canada, in BC, you have a lot of Plutons that go that are, say, 120 or about 100, 120, 110, etc. And in the North Cascades, our oldest Pluton is 96 million that's been dated. And then it comes down to, how do you treat the Okanagan range to the east? So is the Pasayten Fault a huge structure, and the Okanagan range has nothing to do with the North Cascades? Or so you can go ask Chris Mattinson that, Nick, if you he's been working down there. And if you accept that it's not a big fault, then you can say, well, the arc migrated westward from, because the Plutons there get down to about 107, 106 million years, and then they migrate westward to, if you don't have a big fault in there. But if you have 500 kilometers of strike slip, it's another matter.
Well, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, where you struggle with something, you sketch it out, you're like, oh, I think I'm starting to see this, and then you go, oh wait, half of my sketch was in Mexico, or half of my sketch was down in Southern California, so now I'm lost again. There's so many kind of plot twists in this whole thing. It's like crazy, man. It's fun. I'm sorry, viewers. I'm getting carried away. Let me ask you more of yours. Oh, Jeff Tepper's here too. He's in the live chat. Terrific to have you, and thanks again, Jeff. W. Hopkins. Hi, Bob. Good to see you. Based on new dating, how do the Mesozoic basins like the Metau fit in? Hopkins, we're going to wait on you. You want to talk about the Eocene. I'm going to put you off. Sorry about that. I'm editorializing now. That's not very nice of me.
Well, he was one of my first master students.
Oh, my God. Well, this is a family reunion here, for crying out loud. Big Dave, how about a range of thicknesses for the thrust faults? Maybe he means the fault zone, or maybe the thrust sheet, or...
I would assume you mean the thrust sheets, how thick you're loading, right?
Yeah.
So most thrusts, there's a reason they're called sheets, because they tend to be fairly thin, but you can get what's called thick-skinned thrusting in arcs, but we're probably not talking, we may be talking 10 kilometers thick for the sort of at the thick end, but that's really difficult because we have erosion generally, at least within the arc. If you go out into the Northwest Cascade system, they would be they'd be thinner, I think.
Yeah.
Daryl could comment on that since
Sure.
he worked on it.
How about we'll do one more with you, Bob, and then we'll say goodbye to you, and I'll do a few more with the viewers, just myself. This is from Vern Farrell. Bob, what would be a nice few days backpack trip to see a lot of the features that we're discussing today?
Well, there's so many of them, but a nice simple one is in my PhD thesis area, is to go up and hike through the Mount Stuart batholith to the Windy Pass thrust, and you can see the Chewaucam schist, the Mount Stuart, the Ingalls. It's really pretty, and it's not too long. You can do that in a three-day weekend. If you want to see more like some of those pictures that Gary had, you could go up to the Black Peak country and hike up. Copper Pass. He had a picture of that. That might be a fairly tough backpack because the trail isn't well maintained, but you can backpack up in that area off of the Twist River.
Yes. How about this? I'll put you on the spot right before we sign off. Just off the top of your head, are there other mid-Cretaceous thrust faults, names of mid-Cretaceous thrust faults or mid-Cretaceous Plutons that come to mind that we haven't just casually mentioned today?
Well, the famous one is, at least from my days, is the Shuxon thrust. So I don't know if you actually mentioned that or not.
I didn't today. You're right.
Yeah, that's the one that's exposed on Mount Shuxon, and that's kind of a classic. That was Mish's big thrust that he recognized early on when we started learning about the geology of the Cascades. So that and 10 Peak Pluton would be the other interesting 90 million year one that we've done quite a bit of study on, and that's one of these really deep Plutons, which I think is really impressive that it solidified, the magma crystallized at about 30 kilometers depth, maybe 35 kilometers. So we see that now over 100,000 feet of exhumation has occurred. And that's, if you know Washington, you go up basically the White River, gets you into that country. It's near Glacier Peak. Glacier Peak in part is built on top of 10 Peak Pluton. So that would be the other one.
Amazing. Hey, you were excellent today. Thank you so much. I hope
You're
to
welcome.
have you back. And I know these guys enjoyed having you here today. Without even reading the comments, I can just feel that. So I'm going to sign off with you, Bob. I'm going to continue with these guys, but thank you for your time, and
All right.
we'll see you down the road. How about that?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Bye. Bye.
Okay. My God, I'm all discombobulated here. I think we're still communicating. Let's do, of course, 3:30. Let's do a few more, just you and I and the chalkboards, and that's gone. It's just, you know, I really love having these guests on. I know they add to the length of these shows, and I'm not sure we're going to do a guest every show, but we're kind of on a roll here, I got to say. And to me, it's fun to get another voice on here. The experts are chiming in. And you know, who knows if I'll have anybody on Saturday talking about the Rockies, because I don't know a damn thing about the Rockies, but I got some learning to do between now and then. I'm going to look for a few more questions that maybe I can handle, and then we'll sign off today. Any similarities, Greg in Tennessee, any similarities between the Washington Coast Belt and the Montana Coast Belt? I'm not sure, Greg. If you're talking about these two belts here, I guess you're not, because this is not in Montana. So I'm not sure what the Montana Coast Belt is. Maybe you're talking about the belt supergroup. Is that what you're talking about? So there's the old passive margin of North America, and we don't have a passive margin today. Our margin has been too active recently for that to happen. Regine, animation was insular on the resurrection plate. Regine, you've been with us enough to know that I'm afraid of talking about ocean plates because there's so many different ocean plate maps, and it also gets complicated for my brain in a hurry. So I prefer to stick to what we have on land and try to look at patterns and relationships and ages. And I don't think we'll ever really get into lots of ocean plate reconstructions unless I'm feeling perky or we have Spencer Fuston from Houston with us, or Karen Siglock or somebody like that. The Wallowas are part of an old arc. More of a comment, really, TG, than a question. Red Lester, were there any other Plutons formed in the 100 to 80 million year period in Western North America, or was it all in the crash zone? That's an excellent question, and I've been caught in that. And I've partly been caught it's not worth going to it, I guess. But you remember the discussion about subduction making a volcanic arc, so the magma is being made in the conventional way, versus the slab failure idea. Again, I think I'm in the minority. I think the more and more I learn about Montana and Wyoming, that's part of why we're going to the Rockies on Saturday. I keep seeing these Cretaceous Plutons 1,000 miles inland. That can't be a volcanic arc. So I take your, I forget what your name was, Red Lester. Bob is kind of talking about a narrow Cretaceous Pluton belt. I have to listen to these guys. They've been thinking about it for 50 years, but there's just Basil and Bob Hildebrand and a couple others in my ear constantly kind of going, it's a bigger story. I don't remember what your question was, but it gets me to that. Is it a wide zone or a narrow zone of some of this fireworks? Are we getting fireworks going all the way back to frickin' Mount Rushmore? If we are, then is there a change in the company line coming? Just not trying to be difficult. We're just playing with it. Trevor wants to ask about that animation again. So the Alexander terrain, orange, already up north, and Wrangell terrain, green, catches up to it. I can't handle that, Trevor. I'm sorry. Jeff Tepper's in here. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us today and identifying yourself. One more. Patrick's in school, probably. I'm going way back. Oh, everybody's thanking Bob. Before we say goodbye to Bob, we'll finish with Rick. Rick asks, can India be a model for any of these collisions of large masses? Okay, I'm right back to Basil and Hildebrand again. I think the answer is yes. If you look at the Himalayas, what do I know? Okay, come on now. What do I know? I just started thinking about this stuff. But if you have a massive, essentially continent versus continent collision, and you got a bunch of Plutons coming up at that time, how can that be a volcanic arc? Like I was trying to draw on that really... And you can't even read that frickin' thing. But if you have these two continents coming together and you've consumed all the ocean floor, why are you getting these crazy amounts of magma thickening the crust, as Bob was talking about? Do we have that in the Himalayas? Do we have that in India colliding with Asia? Maybe we don't. But I think it's worth, especially if we go to the Rockies on Saturday, continue to think about that. And then we're going to the Eocene. Then we're going to the Eocene. I said one more, but now I'm saying it for real. One more. There we're at. Oh. Will Silesia sink underwater? Okay. So some of you guys are jumping the gun, and that's great. You want to look forward. Basically, myself wants to get to the Eocene, talking about the Silesia. That's coming real soon. Next week? I guess so. Next week. A toast to you. This one felt especially scattered. But I'm glad you hung with us till the end anyway. Here's to you. Here's to the health of your family members and your friends and everyone in your community where you live. Here's to Dr. Bob Miller from San Jose State University, longtime North Cascades expert and a really nice guy. Here's to you, Bob. And not to single people out in the chat, but at least we had Daryl Cowan and Jeff Tepper with us in the chat. Those guys know an incredible amount. Here's to Daryl and Jeff, who I hope to have on here with video form one of these sessions. Daryl and Jeff. And as always, I'll watch this replay probably tomorrow or something, and I'll see what all your comments and things. Nat has been so terrific with, I'm saying it because he's watching right now. I would say it even if you weren't watching Nat. He's been so terrific getting me to this point. I might pull back a little bit, but I like the iPad. I'll do it one more time just before we quit. That's Gary. What else did I have for you? I was so flustered there in the middle. I guess I did show you everything. Oh, hell, I don't want to look at that thing. Thanks for sending it, Jeff, but no idea. Oh, you want? We'll finish with the animation. So I couldn't do this before. Even in the Cozy Fort, I couldn't do it easily. And I think the colors are better. I think the visuals are better, and as I get better with my controls here, we certainly don't need the double marshmallow head in the left frame, but you know, this does work, and I'm not backing away from this. But the camera that's happy tracking up there, I don't know if I'm into that. So I'm continuing to tinker, and I was a little flustered today because of all the new stuff I was trying out, but I hope it had some sort of cohesion for you. And so thank you to Nat. Here's to Nat, computer boy, rock and roll artist. Nat, here's to you. Thank you for joining us today. I guess we'll go back to the iPad one last time to show you the schedule if you did not see it earlier today. Where is it? Hang on. Here. So I will see you for session F this Saturday at 9 a.m. We're sticking to that plan, of course, but I'm tossing in a couple of Sunday mornings because of a 2-week break that we will have at the end of the month for obvious reasons. So looking forward to getting all the way through session L with you. My God, are we still going to be in the Cretaceous for this? No. I'm thinking now almost certainly, don't quote me, almost certainly session G, we will land in the Eocene and not leave it. Thank you. I love you. And goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. End stream. Oh my God. Does this thing go 360? It can. This thing's going 360. Creepy AF. I love you.